Good evening, and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, February 7th, 2022. It is 7:01 p.m., and our sound system is working. And if you all could do a favor for me, if you would make sure to double-check your phones, just to make sure they're on mute, that'll help us, so that they don't ding with text messages or something during the meeting. That'd be grand. Thank you. Appreciate it. Our first item of business is to establish a quorum, and all members of council are present. The next item of business is disposition of the minutes for the regular session held on January 18th, 2022. Could I have a motion to approve these minutes, please?
So moved.
A motion by Councilmember Ziff, a second by Councilmember Reisner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. Next, we have communications. We do have one item. Some of you are familiar with the Sidewalk Accessibility Ad Hoc Committee that was created by an ordinance last year by our former council member Arian Smedley, and this accessibility committee will be meeting next week, February 16th at 2:30 in the afternoon in City Hall. And so we thank everyone who's volunteered to serve on that committee. We've got 5 people who are moving forward with that. Thank you. And a little bit out of the ordinary for communications, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary times. I would like to acknowledge that we have a wonderful neighbor who's from the Plains originally, who attended Athens High School, our very own Joe Burrow. And he's brought attention to the Athens community about and resources to us to our local food pantry. And we're very thankful for that. And we just want to take a moment to wish him well for Sunday. And do any other council members have communications tonight? If not, we'll move on to communications and reports from other elected officials. And I believe that we have our new Athens City Treasurer with us tonight, and he has submitted reports to the council members for their review. And Josh, if you'd like to come up to the podium for just a moment. Welcome.
Thank you. I know many of you already, but for those of you that don't know me, I just want to come tonight and kind of introduce myself. I am Josh Thomas. My wife Jessica and I own Brennan's down the street. We have been in Athens. We basically owned Brennan's since 2000, but we've run it since 97, so we've been about 25 years here in Athens. So most things Athens we're up to speed on. And again, last year around this time, Steve mentioned that the treasurer position might become available, and just over months of talking about it and this and that, we finally got the job done. Marianne McClure had put in her resignation, I believe, on January 4th, and then they swore me in, I think, on the 5th or the 6th. So it's been a smooth transition so far. Marianne has been more than gracious with her time. Has been helping me through the process. The reports that I've submitted to you is kind of a collaboration of the two of us. She's worked me through, how everything goes and how everything works. And we got that done, and so that kind of sums up her time there in 2021. And again, I really want to say a lot of thanks to the auditor's office as well. Everybody there has been more than helpful in anything that I've needed so far. But again, still a learning process. We're still kind of going through some things, and I'm picking up as I go. So you have the report in front of you there. That's what I hope to submit every month. So you'll have the accounts, the balances, and then the interest summary also in there too. If you have any questions, always feel free to email me or ask, and if I know the answer, I'll tell you, and if I don't know the answer at that exact moment, I will figure it out, and we'll get back to you.
And do we have any questions or comments from council members? Thank you for the reports. It's nice to have reconciliation as an added feature to the reports. Yes. And I noticed from the interest income that we did have, and I think Marianne had mentioned this, in November we had CDs. And so there was some income from that this past year, so that was helpful. 3 of those CDs came due in November, and we rolled those back over into 1 year. They will come due again this November as well. Okay, good to know. All right, well, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you.
All right, other reports from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason?
No.
Mayor Patterson?
No, sir.
Okay, and Auditor Hecht, I believe we have your report that you had submitted to us today, too.
I did. I mailed that early. In the past, I've done these end-of-the-year reports for my office, and last year, besides COVID, I was recovering from surgery right now, and I don't even hardly remember last January and February, but So I thought I'd get back on it because I think it's a really good exercise. If you've had any time, maybe not, I just sent this late this afternoon, to look over some of this stuff. I think it's a good exercise for people in my office and probably everybody even personally to look back on the year at things you've accomplished and things like that. So I've been doing this for a long time and I usually present it to council. I sent you a summary. There's 5 people that work under me. They each had a full-page report. So I narrowed it down to like 6 bullet points, but I'm not going to read all of them, even that for tonight, the 6 that I put in your report. Starting out with payroll, another thing that people usually ask for is who are the highest paid employees in the city. We've run those every year for many years. I don't know what happened last year, if it happened or not, but anyway, you all got that. The top 35 highest paid employees were all, and it's been like this for a long time. 34 were police and fire employees, and although there is one other office holder that would have been in there, but he was on military leave last year. So, but anyway, the highest paid employees are listed in that. If anybody has any other questions or wants more, the list to be longer or anything like that, just let me know. So anyway, I'm going to start with payroll. And I think that a lot of the things I picked out are the numbers. It just astonishes me after 18 years and looking at this stuff every day, how much goes on in the city and how much money comes and goes. And so anyway, just out of curiosity, and I've watched these numbers go up. An average payroll for the city is approximately $434,000. That's every 2 weeks. Gross payroll for 2021 was $11,721,206. Deductions totaled $3,603,854. That's just payroll. Special pays are processed for all employees, including longevity, holiday, and comp time buyouts. Longevity checks in 2021 totaled $118,183. Holiday checks totaled $133,996. If anybody has any questions, you can let me know, but those are basically for employees who work holidays or not. They don't really get holidays throughout the year, so they get a payout of all the holidays for the year. They just get scheduled as they're scheduled, police and fire, and so they get those extra checks. Longevity checks include our people who've been here for a long time. City did away with longevity. It was an effort to keep employees, but it became very, very expensive, and so the amounts were rolled into people's pay, and then we stopped adding it on several years ago. We do pension reports to PERS, police and fire, monthly for all employees. We also pay life insurance, city withholding, taxes for other cities, for people who work here and don't live in Athens. Of course, they pay Athens tax too, but along with dental and vision enrollment and bill payment. And accounts payable, and really everybody should know Sarah if you work for the city. She's our payroll person, so if you have any issues with your pay, she's the person to call in my office. Accounts payable is Heather. She pays all our bills and records all our revenue. So vouchers are what are submitted for a check. So last year we had 5,615 vouchers processed. Those are based on invoices that we received and paid out, whether it was for utilities or services or vehicles. 2,465 actual checks were issued for a total of $11,907,385,000. Now, our budget is much higher than that, and we spend a lot more than that. But as you know, all of our loan payments are paid with EFTs, electronic funds transfers, and we pay lots of other bills that way too. So not all of the things that we pay for get an actual check written for them. Let's see. We track uniform purchases for 160 plus employees and report quarterly to payroll. They get taxed on uniform purchases that can be worn in their everyday life. So, so as you can imagine, most of police and fire uniforms are not taxable. Maintenance workers, most of theirs is. We don't tax safety equipment either. So then there's the posting of the revenue. So all the revenue received by all the departments into 53 different funds totaled $45,873,710. So $45 million in revenue we had last year. And that includes interest earned on bank accounts and tax payments and really all the revenue that comes in. So then we go to the deputy auditor. She does a lot, and she helps with the other positions a lot. But some of the things that she wrote down, she paid on 19 loans and notes for a total amount of $3,646,183. We paid off 2 loans, the pumper truck and the sanitary sewer improvements, so that was nice. But yeah, it's a lot of money that we have in loans. And still we're near our limit. There is a debt limit imposed on municipalities and other public entities. And this would be council stuff. We processed 153 fund appropriations, aside from the original budget, 23 interfund transfers, and one of the things that we pay several things in our department aside from TIF payments to the schools and transient guest tax payments to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We pay all the claims for our medical costs. EBS is our carrier, our administrator for that. 52 payments were made, that's 1 a week, and we review and make sure that claims that we're paying are for people who are still actually employed by us. The total of that was $3,703,140. So the medical payments are expensive. And also on the sheet, as you can see, $475,000 of that were prescription claims. 12 payments were made to EBS for admin fees. I just think it's good for council to see some of these actual numbers besides just what we put in those account lines on our reports. $565,831 are what we paid them to administer our medical plan. And then I had to go ahead and throw this one in. We had a very successful 2020 audit. Again, no management letter. And we did a prescription audit last year. We used to be on a regular schedule for that. We lost the people who would do that for us, and we've been trying to find someone else. So last year we just had them do the prescription audit. But this coming year they're going to do our medical fund audit for us. So I'll report on that when those results come back. Income tax, it's been a crazy year for that. They processed 2,220 returns, opened 435 new taxpayer accounts, and processed 965 withholding account reconciliations. The withholding accounts are our bread and butter, really. That's where we get most of our tax revenue that are paid by businesses for the employees. They worked really hard last year. Letters, calls, emails to delinquent filers. You'd be surprised how many people will ignore our letters from the tax department. Sometimes even the letters from the law director's office, and they help us a lot with these. Once we get too far down, the line, we're not getting any responses. So Crystal helped collect 271 delinquent withholding accounts, and the business and 97 business and resident accounts, for a total of 368 delinquent accounts that are now current, and $61,794 in past due taxes collected for the year. Crystal's also worked with Robert Payne at OU throughout the second half of '21 in an effort to streamline the anticipated refund requests we'll be receiving for the 2021 tax year. We had 70 of them come in already. There's 100 of them sitting there waiting for the approval through their finance office, and probably, not at all. So the refunds will be really tough this year, but I think the thing to move forward, it's not a one-time thing, that after this point, starting this year, people who aren't working full-time in the city and don't live in the city they won't be withholding their taxes anymore. So we won't be getting that money in the first place to refund it. So that will reduce our tax revenue moving forward. And they're also really good about tracking the Excel spreadsheet we have for new businesses within the city limits to make sure that they are on board and realize that we have a local tax, et cetera, et cetera. We get a lot of help from the code office for that. They report anytime they get a new business, information about that. And finally, our new tax person, Tanya, is doing, and these are some things that, there are just so many extra little things that, and it's not just my office that we have to do, but she secures our daily backup tapes. So we have to have secondary backup for all of our financial information for our financial software. So we run actual tapes, and they are taken next door and put in a locked area. And then we also are backed up in the cloud. But that has to be done every day. We also have to do a service shutdown and a CMI backup restore, where we shut down and then see if CMI, which is our software carrier, is able to restore our information after that. And that's done periodically. Tanya also helped review the business questionnaire, set up new accounts, and she's kind of proud of what she did and how much she's learned. There's quite a bit more that she's still working on. She did a lot of the posting of deposits. So we get ACH deposits, we get tax payments through the Hall Business Gateway, and then people mail in tax returns with checks all the time. So anyway, my final comment then is that our total income tax revenue for 2021 was $16,719,142. So, unless you have any questions, I think that's a lot of information. Maybe more than you want to know about my office, but the council is in charge of the budget and appropriating money, and I think you need to know how much we bring in and how much it costs for a lot of the services that we provide even to our own employees. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions or comments before you sit down? Yes, Councilmember Swain.
A couple. When you mentioned the refunds, I detected a little bit of consternation in your voice. Do we have any idea how big that total refund is going to be?
No, we don't. We have a little bit of an idea of an average, but I hate to put it out there because we don't really know. About a week ago, they had like 90 or 95 refunds, and now they've sent 70 over because all that has to be done securely, and there's another 100 sitting there. So there were a lot of people, like 400 to 600 at least, who did not work on campus or at least didn't full-time last year. So my thought is, if they're going to bother filing for a refund, it's not going to be, a minimal amount of money. They're going to, if they didn't work on campus full time, it's not like they missed a day a month. It was days every week that they missed, and it's going to add up. And so I don't know, but we've had a good working relationship with our person at OU, and he helped us. We set up a form. He has a process for people, because employees there are calling his office to ask questions already. I have a draft of an email that we're going to send out to the accountants to let them know what the requirements are. when you work in the city and out kind of thing. And so, we'll see how it goes. But no, I really don't have any idea. And that's just one operation.
Right.
There's plenty of other ones around, if you think about it, where people did not work in the city limits. And when you think about it, there's quite a few people who work in the city and live in the city. There's a lot that don't. I mean, in my office, I'm the only one that lives in the city out of 6 of us. And it was the same way in the law director's office, but there's, been some changes over there, so I don't know, what that is. But I think people would be surprised how far some people drive into the city. Lisa and I both have someone who drives from, they each drive from McConnellsville, a good hour every day to work here. So, yeah, I really don't know what it's going to be. But yeah, it's kind of worrisome. And the thing is, the worrisome for us now is processing the refunds, plus the revenue amount. But then we'll know how much revenue we're not going to be collecting moving forward, because they're not going to withhold on people as a full-time in the city if they know they aren't going to work here. If they've set up some kind of hybrid or work from home schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Second question's a little easier. On the first sheet that you sent us, the top wage earners, if I read this correctly, the fourth column deals with hours, and I assume that's the number of hours worked in the entire year. If someone were to work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, including paid vacation, so on and so forth, they would work 2,080 hours. The top earner on here is listed at 3,374. Is that other 1,300? Are those other 1,300 hours overtime, or is it more complicated than that?
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. They work, it depends. So the first one, fire department, they worked 24.96 as opposed to 20.80. But yeah, so any hours over their number of hours is overtime pay. So they don't necessarily work. They might work more than 24.96, just like we have people right now in the last few days who've been working more than their 20.80, their regular 40 hours on the streets and all that kind of stuff. But they also get overtime, and so it's not necessarily that they work that many hours over.
Right.
But they did work more hours.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council members? Okay, thank you so much for the report and all the detail. And it's a lot to handle in addition to the audits. Yeah, that's so.
Oh, yeah.
And it's critical for us and our operations. Thanks. All right, we'll now move on to ordinances for second reading. And for those of you attending for the first time, council requires 3 readings of an ordinance. And so many of these, we have no readings, we have no ordinances for third reading tonight. So what we're going to be starting off with are ordinances for second reading. I read the title, I pause to see if there are any questions or comments from city council members or administration, other elected officials, or the audience, and questions can be asked. And then I believe we have just a few ordinances for first reading tonight, and so when those come up, you will see that the person introducing the legislation has some background information and a summary before the discussion starts. So ordinances for second reading. 122 is an ordinance authorizing unneeded or obsolete municipal personal property to be sold by internet auction and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. Any comments or questions from council, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. Not, we'll move on to Ordinance 222. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 17, Municipal Income Tax, Chapter 17.01, and General Section 17.01.012, Purposes of Tax Rate. That is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. Any questions or comments from our council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. 322 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a housing revolving loan fund administration agreement with the state of Ohio Development Services Agency and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. Any questions or comments? Okay. Ordinance 422 is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 150-21 and authorizing the auditor to make interfund transfers, and this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. Do I have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to Ordinance 522. This is an ordinance authorizing a city fiber network, Project 347, introduced by Councilmember Mccary. And if no questions or comments, we'll move on to 622. This is an ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract reopener with the Athens City Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Inc., and the City of Athens Patrol Officers, Lieutenants, and Communications Officers concerning wages, and is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Any comments or questions? If none, Ordinance 722 is an ordinance authorizing a one-time retention payment for the City of Athens Patrol Officers, Lieutenants, and Communications Officers, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. And if no questions or comments, we'll move on to 822. This is an ordinance authorizing preliminary engineering services for the Uptown Improvements Project number 329, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
When we spoke of this last time, the issue was brought up of possibly looking, and this is a question for the mayor, so rather than rambling on, I'll notify him right off the bat, and the possibility of looking at the Mill Street thing. Do we have any feedback on that, if that's a possibility, or we're still waiting for an answer perhaps?
No, it is a possibility that we can include that in with this particular project.
Great,
Okay,
thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to 922. This is an ordinance authorizing disposal of certain vehicles no longer needed for a municipal purpose, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. Any questions or comments? If none, we'll move on to Ordinance 1022. This is an ordinance granting a special right-of-way use permit to Paul Richard, owner, DBA Good Works, Inc., 100 Central Avenue, to construct an accessible parking space, and is introduced by Councilmember Grace. Yes.
President Isley, I would like to introduce an amendment to Ordinance 1022. And it is a very straightforward issue, one that was mentioned previously by Member Spielness. And the paperwork completed and turned into the Code Enforcement Office listed Paul Richard as the owner. We need to strike his name and also strike DBA, doing business as, and it should simply state that it would be granting a special right-of-way use permit to Good Works, Inc., owner, 100 Central Avenue. And that same language appears in two different places in the ordinance, so it would be in Section 2 and in Section 3, Paragraph 2.
Okay, and you're making that a motion?
Yes, I'd like to
amend.
make a motion that we amend Ordinance 1022.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Councilmember Ziff. Okay, and is there any discussion or any questions? This was brought up last time with a comment. Was that truly the owner? I think Councilmember Spielness asked about that. Yes, Mayor Patterson.
Did I hear exactly, Councilmember Grace, that there was two locations that you have to make that amendment?
Just two spaces in the ordinance.
Okay.
As the ordinance, reads that Section 1, having satisfactorily met the regulations, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so it's actually 3, because I see it there. Yes, thank you. So it would be in 3 locations.
3, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3.
So this is striking the words Paul Richard, owner, DBA, doing business as, okay, and leaving the Good Works.
So
Okay.
we'll leave owner, but we'll put that after Good Works,
Good
Inc.
Works, owner, okay. Okay.
So Good Works, Inc. is the owner of 100 Central Avenue, and we want that to be stated consistently throughout the ordinance.
Got it. All right, we have a motion and second. Any other questions or comments?
I just want to say.
Yes,
thank you,
Councilmember
Member-
Spielness, yes.
Thank you, Member Grace, because I did speak with him and confirm what that was, so.
Well,
Yeah, that
Thank
definitely
you
needs to change.
for raising the issue and for clerk and law director looked into it, so thank you.
Okay.
Question?
Yes, Councilmember Swank.
And looking in the supporting documentation, the Title 49 application, we have Mr. Richards' name all over it. Does that need to be resubmitted?
No,
Okay.
no, it does not. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The ordinance has been amended and read for the first time. Ordinance 1122 is an ordinance accepting a utility and ingress-egress easement on South Blackburn Road and is introduced by Councilmember Grace. Any comments or questions? Seeing none. Ordinance 1222 is an ordinance accepting a perpetual easement to construct and maintain a sewer in the name and for the use of the city of Athens, introduced by Councilmember Grace. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, audience? Okay. Ordinance 1322 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to execute an intra-county mutual aid agreement between the city of Athens and the Athens County Sheriff's Office. And this is introduced by Councilmember Mccary. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to Ordinance 1422. This is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing of softening salt for the water treatment plant and is introduced by Councilmember Mccary. Any questions or comments? If none, then we'll move on to Ordinance 1522. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract for a new restroom facility at the West State Street Park. This is project number 349, introduced by Councilmember Mccary. Any questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Since our last meeting on the 18th, we have discovered that the, for lack of a better term, prefab restroom that we were going to purchase is not going to work and is no longer available or will not be available.
Okay.
This was brought up at the Arts, Park, and Recreation Committee meeting, the advisory board meeting, excuse me, I'm just looking for the date here, on the 20th.
Okay.
And therefore, I wonder, should we proceed with this until we get a better idea? Should we need to amend the $250,000? Maybe the mayor has some additional information.
No, this is something that we're going to end up going out to bid on, and it'll be a bid up to $250,000
Okay.
for the restroom facility.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the update. If no other questions or comments, we'll move on to Ordinance 1622. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Business System Solutions, Inc., known as BSSI, for Information Technology Network Management Services, and is introduced by Councilmember Mccary. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. If not, Ordinance 1722 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 8421 to increase the authorized expenditure for structural repairs to the Athens Fire Department headquarters, Project 343. And this is introduced by Councilmember Mccary. Any questions or comments? If none, we'll move on to 1822. This is an ordinance authorizing construction design for a new Athens Fire Department headquarters, project number 346, and is introduced by Councilmember Mccary. And any questions or comments?
Related question. Is this going to be on the ballot in May?
Yes.
In checking the Board of Elections website today, it is not listed, although a multitude of other issues are, as are candidates for office.
I'm glad you checked. We can check further too, because I know that we passed the ordinances in December and sent them, I believe, before the end of the year. Council Clerk,
Yes.
is that correct? We sent them before the end of the year to the clerk. So
But as
the
of
Board
5 o'clock
Elections.
today, they were not listed, although all of the other things were.
Okay, so we'll follow up on that
Okay.
right away. Thank you for checking on that. And we might also remind people that this is for the construction design. It's certainly at the preliminary stage, but we are soliciting public comments through our survey form on the city website. And then the other item is that we've had one public hearing. We will have an additional public hearing in March. And we will have a third reading for this as well. We'll now move on to ordinances for first reading. 1922 is an ordinance authorizing all actions necessary to accept the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, known as NOPEC, 2022 Energized Community Grants Funds, and introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'll just go ahead and read the pertinent sections of this ordinance. Whereas the City of Athens is a member of the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council, NOPEC, and is eligible for one or more NOPEC Energized Community Grants for 2022. And whereas the City of Athens has previously entered into a grant agreement with NOPEC to receive one or more NEC grants, be it ordained that the City of Athens, County of Athens, and State of Ohio, that Section 1, the Council of the City of Athens finds and determines that it is in the best interest of the city to accept the NEC grant for 2022, and does hereby authorize the mayor to accept the NEC grant funds. We will be seeing later today in the Appropriation Ordinance how this grant will be used. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? If not, we'll move on to Ordinance 2022. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 Appropriation Ordinance 150-21 and authorizing the auditor to make interfund transfers. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'll go ahead and go through these items. This appropriation ordinance includes the following amounts: $65,000 appropriated to the general fund, other administrative, for payments to the Board of Elections, the Health Department, and the County Auditor for fees. $35,000 to the general fund police to replace an APD server. $403,000 to the general fund fire for a loan payment. $7,450 to the general fund lands and buildings to replace less efficient light bulbs with more efficient LED bulbs. And this is from the NOP, the NOPEC grant award previously discussed. $50,300 to the street fund for a loan payment. $9,301.20 to the CDBG fund for transfer. And I'll be discussing the transfer here in just a second of the individual amounts. And $100,000 to the TIF fund. This is a payment from the Tax Incremental Financing Fund for a payment to the Athens City Schools. And $19,800 to the Internal Service IT Fund. This is to cover medical fund appropriation for an open IT position in the staffing ordinance. And finally, the last bit of this appropriation ordinance is the transfers, and this is for the administrative amounts for the different offices, different departments in the city that administer the CDBG fund. So there are amounts going to the general fund, the mayor's office, the street fund, the water administration fund, and the sewer administration fund. And all those amounts equal the $9,301.20 that I mentioned previously. Thank you, President Isley.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions?
I do.
Yes, Councilmember Spelman. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Crowell. I spoke with Chief Pyle today for some time, and he gave me his orientation so that I could get a sense of, how things work. And he showed me his server, which is 15 years old. And my understanding from that conversation was that it was not $35,000 he needed, but more like $50,000 to pay for the server. So I'd appreciate if we could confirm that number. I might have misunderstood, but I think it's worth discussing. Again, it's 15 years old. It's coming. He said they have problems with it every day. It's vital to their operations. So I want to make sure that we get what we need.
Okay, and thank you for bringing this up on the first reading, because we'll have time to check that out this week and then report back to you. Thank you. Okay, yes, Mayor Patterson.
I will look into that. It may be that he already has budgeted for $15,000 in his account, so I'll look to see what the difference is with those two. I'll find out for you. I suspect that that's what it is.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to ordinance 2122. This is an ordinance amending the 2022 staffing levels and pay grades authorized by ordinance 14121 and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. Yes, this is amending, updating some changes to the city's staffing positions. Most of these changes are in name, changing from a supervisor to a coordinator. There are a few pay rate things included in this amended ordinance, including for the pool manager at the city pool, as well as a cemetery position in lands and buildings. The departments that are impacted here are engineering and public works, recreation and the community center, sanitation and the code department, our chief information officer in the city of Athens, that position being removed. And then at the end of the document, City Council will see that there are additions of these positions to the pay grade bands after having gone through the process by the HR Director Lucas. So Section 1 of this ordinance reads, the 2022 staffing levels and pay grades authorized by Ordinance 14121 are hereby amended to read as attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Thank you, President Nisley.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience? Okay. We'll move on to ordinance 2222. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to close streets in the uptown area for special events during the 2022 calendar year and to change requested dates or cancel events as necessary, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance and the two that follow are all interrelated, so bear with me on this. Before I read all of Section 1, I just want to make the proviso that this list is more or less placeholders for events. An event can be canceled, and that placeholder will still be opened. So there'd be a possibility of another event slipping in. So, as it were, I will read Section 1. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to close streets in the uptown area for special events during the 2022 calendar year, to change requested dates or cancel events, and implement the following. A, close designated streets to vehicular traffic in the City of Athens no earlier than 6 a.m. and no later than midnight, and maintain cross-traffic wherever practicable for the following events. Ohio University International Street Festival, April 9, 2022. Ohio University Heritage College Osteopathic Medicine Memorial Service, April 15, 2022. Athens County Convention and Visitor Bureau Taste of Athens County Food Festival, May 14, 2022. The Plains Lions Club Cruise ends June 10, 2022, July 29, 2022, September 9, 2022. Athens Brick Criterion, June 17, 2022 through June 18, 2022. Ohio Brew Week First Call, July 8, 2022. Ohio Brew Week Last Call, July the 16th, 2022. Ohio Health Bounty on the Bricks, August 6th, 2022. Athens Arts and Music Festival, August 13th, 2022. Ohio University Welcome Weekend Student Fair, August 21st, 2022. Joint Police Advisory Council Barbecue, October 5th, 2022. A Yuba Trick or Treat, October 24th, 2022. Halloween Weekend, October the 29th, 2022. Annual Holiday Tree Lighting, December the 1st, 2022. And Section B, ban parking on designated streets beginning no earlier than 3 a.m. and no later than 1 a.m. the following day to accommodate said events. And it's been read for the first time.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? If none from council members, administration, elected officials, or our audience, we will move on to 2322. This is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Title 13, General Offenses, Chapter 13.04, Offenses Against Public Peace, Section 13.04.10, Unnecessary Noise in a Designated Area, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Read this. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, the enforcement of Athens City Code Title 13, General Offenses, Chapter 13.04, Offenses Against Public Peace, Section 13.04.10, Unnecessary Noise, is hereby suspended until midnight for the following events. Athens Brick Criterium, Athens County Convention and Visitors Bureau Taste of Athens County Food Festival, Ohio Brew Week First Call, Ohio Brew Week Last Call, Athens Arts and Music Festival, Halloween Weekend.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? If none, we'll move on to 2422. This is an ordinance suspending the enforcement of Athens City Code Chapter 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting to allow vending in a designated area, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read this. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, the ordinance of Athens City Code 11.04, vending, peddling, and soliciting is hereby suspended from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. to allow vending in the designated street closure areas at such times and areas determined appropriate by the administration for the following events: Ohio University International Street Festival, Athens County Convention and Visitor Bureau Taste of Athens County Food Festival, Athens Brick Criterium, Ohio Brew Week First Call, Ohio Brew Week Last Call, Athens Arts and Music Festival, Halloween Weekend. Section 2. Prospective vendors shall register their names, addresses, and items to be vended with the Code Enforcement Office by 2 p.m. on or before 2 business days prior to the listed events. Vendors shall be entitled to vending spots on a first-come basis as determined by the Code Enforcement Office. Vendors must comply with all rules and regulations established by the Office of Code Enforcement. Section 3. Vending shall be subject to the following. Those vendors currently holding a license to vend on East Union Street shall be allowed to continue to operate at a time and location determined by the Service Safety Director and the event organizer. For all other vendors per trailer, a fee of $25 paid to the City of Athens Code Office, and a food license permit from the Athens City County Health Department shall be required, and any additional administrative rules and regulations as may be established by the Service Safety Director.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? If none, we'll move on to 2522. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 3, Administrative Provisions, Unlawful Discriminatory Practices, and is introduced by Councilmember Mccary.
Thank you. This would be an important opportunity for us to update our anti-discrimination legislation to provide this additional protection. I was fortunate to consult with our clerk and our law director to confirm that this is something that can be updated through definitions in this ordinance. I will read the highlighted piece. Specifically, that race includes traits historically associated with race, including but not limited to hair textures and protective and cultural hairstyles. Protective and cultural hairstyles includes, but is not limited to, such hairstyles as braids, locks, cornrows, bantu knots, afros, and twists, whether or not hair extensions or treatments are used to create or maintain any such styles, and whether or not hair is adorned by hair ornaments, beads, or head wraps. We won't be the first city in the state of Ohio to make this kind of change. It was Columbus, Ohio that really set the example in January of 2021. There is a national effort people can learn about by searching for information online about the Crown Act. There will need to be an educational component to this piece so that the letter of the law isn't the only thing we're worried about offering protection, but that we're actually informing people about how the implicit biases we sometimes carry will cause us to deem one's hairstyle as unprofessional or inappropriate. This sort of grievance would be taken to our Athens Community Relations Commission. And I think my only question this evening was about any past experiences, perhaps our law director or others might be able to share about how discrimination claims are processed through that commission, or if there have been anti-discrimination claims that they worked on in the recent past.
I'm not familiar with any.
Then I guess my question would be, can we speculate to what would actually happen if someone felt that they were discriminated based on their hair, and we were notified and we shared that complaint with our Community Relations Commission? Any thoughts?
Only that they could investigate and get more information.
Is that something that your office would help with in the investigation, or is it less formal than that?
Well, we haven't had a situation arise in the past,
Thank you.
so our office would certainly be happy to assist.
Thank you. And I would welcome any questions or comments.
Any other questions or comments from council members? Or, yes, just wait just a second. We'll take council members first, administration, and then other elected officials, and then the audience members.
Cool.
And so do you, okay.
You want to go first? I'll go second.
Okay.
Councilmember Swank, or Councilmember Spielness, yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate this, and I told you that I'm glad that you're doing this. I've said that in the past. My hesitation, or my concern with these, not hesitation, my concern with this kind of issue is enforcement. And I think you're alluding to that. And, what happens if a complaint comes up? What's the process? What's preventing someone from discriminating and basically getting away with it because there isn't a mechanism to do anything about it? And so that concerns me a little bit.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Yes, and Councilmember Swank?
Yes, when this was first brought to our attention, 2 weeks ago, I believe, we had that week off, so it's been 2 weeks. I think, and I don't mean to speak for anyone on council, but I think council was pretty much unanimous in the belief that discrimination in any form really just doesn't have any place in this world, and certainly doesn't have any place in Athens, Ohio. But because this was something new to me, decided to do some research as to the hows, the whys, and all of that. And out of that came some questions. Does this pertain to all races?
Yes, it's my understanding that there's no, this is expanding the definition of race to include this particular dimension, but is not restricted to a particular race.
Okay, great. And where does it pertain? In other words, are educational institutions such as Ohio University and the Athens City Schools affected by this? What about those in the healthcare and hospital fields? Businesses or industries in particular, and I'll use the term industries, that have certain OSHA standards. And then, of course, food service and food safety. In those 4 areas, and I'm sure there are many, many, many more, if we were to adopt this in our 3 readings, would it apply to all of those?
It's my understanding that it does, but that it doesn't place any blanket rules or restrictions on businesses, for example, that have a safety regulation that requires some sort of specific guidelines for what kind of hairstyles or protective hairnets must be worn. So this would not override any of those safety procedures that a business would be responsible for putting in place.
Okay. The process, I think it was answered. If someone were to experience this discrimination, they would complain to the law director's office. Is that what I heard? Or the commission on?
Community
We
relations.
have a
Community-
Community Relations
Right.
Commission.
And then I guess the follow-up to that is, if it were deemed that there was discrimination documented, what are the sanctions, what are the penalties? And the reason I ask that, in doing the research, this kind of goes back, well, it doesn't kind of back, it goes back to a case in Alabama in 2013, where someone was offered a job in customer service, but they were informed that their dreadlocks violated the company's grooming policy, and the job offer was retracted. The individual took it to the Southern District of Alabama, and the claim was dismissed. It was appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in 2016, and it too was, the original thing was upheld, stating that, quote, Title VII protects persons in covered categories with respect to immutable characteristics, but not their cultural practices. The sad part is, in my opinion, from there, the Supreme Court refused to hear the case. So in terms of sanction and penalties, would we be enacting something that there's no teeth to? So I throw this out for your consideration. In the Ohio House at this point in time, there is a bill, House Bill 535, that is almost identical to this. Rather than individual cities, Columbus, Athens, your hometown of Oberlin, my hometown of Akron, enacting this legislation, might it be prudent to see what happens in Columbus, but yet make it known via resolution that this city council supports this 100%? I throw that out for your consideration, and that of the council.
Councilmember Crowe.
Thank you. Thank you for your research, Member Swank. I'll just say that I see no reason not to move forward on this, Member Mccary. In the city of Athens, sometimes we have to step forward and be a leader in the state and not wait, certainly, for the state to do things that we're not sure exactly what they're going to do. And I think that we can stand up for our rights for home rule and to passing ordinances like this and making a statement, if nothing else, about our values. So I would encourage this to remain on the consideration. Thank you, President Isaac.
Thank you. Other council members? Do we have anybody else before Councilmember Spielness speaks again?
I do want to say, Madam.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with, I understand, I really appreciate what you did, Member Swank. I do think that, though, sometimes it takes, as with state laws, a number of states will, for example, with LGBT marriage, for example, or, marriage equality. It wasn't until a lot of states did it that the federal government came through. And I think to a certain extent we can see this in the state of Ohio. If we say we support this and we pass this ordinance, I think that's making a statement for other cities to come forward as well. So I kind of prefer that as a strategy, but I see where you're coming from.
Okay, thank you. Just threw it out for consideration.
Yeah, no.
Any other comments or questions from council members or administration or elected officials? Now we'll move to, yep.
I think
go ahead.
I better ask
Mccary.
the question of if we do have comparable kinds of discrimination that we can point to specific sanctions, as it was put. Is there something close to this that we could look to for any sense of what could be done after, say, an investigation determined that discrimination did happen? And I guess that's a question for our law director.
And I was thinking about this, and by second reading next week, I will comb through and give you an idea of what the entire process would be.
Thank you so much. That's the last one for me.
And comments from our audience? Yes. Please come up and if you could tell us your name and address and whether or not you represent a group.
Yeah. Jordan Paisel, 61 Franklin. I'm not representing a group. I would like to speak in support of this ordinance. I think it's a really great step to help Athens to be as inclusive as possible. I think commenting on something said earlier, I don't really have that much faith in the Ohio State Legislature to pass non-discrimination ordinances at this point, or non-discrimination laws. And I think if it ends up being redundant, I don't see an issue, but I think it would be a really great step, as was also brought up, to be one of the cities in Ohio to start pressuring them, hey, we want this, do it, and then also just provide those protections as soon as possible. I don't see a reason to wait. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Okay. Anybody else from the audience? Yes, please come up. If you could give us your name and address, and if you represent a group.
Hi, my name is Jordan Schmidt. I live at 39 East Carpenter, and I don't represent a group. You mentioned that there may be like specific types of education measures included in this legislation, and I was just wondering like what types of measures that would include, and if that would be implemented towards specific law enforcement and specific law enforcement officers, to kind of diminish that implicit bias that you mentioned, included in the legislation, and what education would take place.
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm happy to respond to. So these educational needs are not specified in the legislation, but I meant to make the point that this legislation won't be effective without additional complementary educational methods. And I actually think that these kinds of methods will align very closely with our city's anti-racism work, including the racial equity and leadership training that all city employees will be going through. I think it's a prime opportunity to engage our Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County in conversations about this kind of discrimination. As I've begun to do so, I hear stories that can be educational from people's firsthand experiences. There's a lot of research out there, including at the national level, Dove, the corporation, has partnered in trying to do some important educational pieces around this to show even that kids in schools, for instance, indicate often having experienced some sort of hair discrimination, particularly for African Americans, by the time they're 12. So there's a blend of awareness spreading, but also the kind of implicit biases that we'll be educating on through the real work. And then I think proactively engaging our Athens Community Relations Commission, which would be responsible for investigating any claims of discrimination, getting them to leverage their strengths for some educational initiatives, I believe would be important too.
Thank you so much, and thank you for introducing this. I think it's really important in legislation, so thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thanks for all the comments. We'll move on to Ordinance 2622, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Section 9.11.10, face coverings in public spaces, and declaring this ordinance an emergency measure to extend through May 31st, 2022. This is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley. We discussed this a fair amount a couple weeks ago in committee, and I will just read the pertinent sections of the ordinance, and then I have a couple of additional comments. But whereas as of February 4th, 2022, according to data from the Ohio Department of Health, the people of Athens County have experienced 13,662 cases and 112 deaths, and 49.25% of the population is vaccinated against COVID-19. Whereas on February 4th, 2022, guidance from the CDC states that people, including children older than 2, should wear a mask in indoor public places if they are not fully vaccinated, and if they are fully vaccinated and in an area with substantial or high transmission of COVID-19. And whereas on February 4th, 2022, according to data from the CDC, Athens County was experiencing high transmission of COVID-19. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, and the additional language to amend the previous mask ordinance, the language inserted says effective through May 31st, 2022. And then Section 2, the emergency measure, also changes the date from February 28th to May 31st. So in thinking about this issue, which is an issue I think about quite a bit, I tend to watch the data and recommendations from the experts and professionals in this area closely, and I've been continuing to watch our local case numbers, and I receive emails on a nearly daily basis alerting me to cases in my kids' schools. And so, but on the other hand, our daily count numbers are declining. And at the moment, it looks like a fairly rapid drop in cases. So I want to proceed with introducing this extension of the mask ordinance, but I want to state that we can all continue to watch the situation. This is the first read of this, and I think that it's wise to give ourselves the time and the flexibility to have this in place so that the existing mask order continues. But we can reevaluate at second read and have new data. But I think I try to watch what's happening here locally in Athens City, Athens County, what's happening in the state and across our country, but then also what may be happening in other countries. And for instance, the most recent strain of the virus, we saw coming for a little from overseas before it got here and started impacting our local numbers. And so I will be continuing to monitor the data from researchers around the world. And I think this gives us some time to keep an eye on things and really consider the best options for protecting the health and safety of the residents of Athens. So those are my thoughts and comments on this at the present time.
We'll open it up to comments or questions from council members first. Councilmember Spielness.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I've spoken to some business owners in the community, and as I mentioned, I spoke with Chief Pyle today about the challenges of the ordinance, and I feel very strongly about wearing masks, and I feel very strongly about getting vaccinated and whatever we can do as a public health measure. What I'm hearing, though, is that people who want to wear the mask are going to wear the mask. People who believe in the mask are going to, it's like any law. I have a student here, former student here, so I can say one of my policy lessons was if the population affected believes in the law, they are going to follow it. If they don't believe in the law, they're going to do everything they can to subvert it. And I'm concerned that what's happening is that. We have people who are following the law because they believe in it, and we don't have enough teeth in this to force people to maintain it. And one of the challenges that the police have, and they don't get very many complaints, by the way, if you looked over the activity call, almost nothing. And when they do go out to a business, the business does not want to have a police officer arrest somebody or take somebody out of their business because they don't want that all over social media to hurt their business. So we're kind of stuck in a difficult spot. And I was all about continuing the mandate until I started talking to people about the reality of it. And so I'm hesitant. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And, okay, Councilmember Swank?
Yeah, 2 points. If we were to talk about this in 2 weeks, and we did not want the current mask ordinance to expire and create a 7-day window, we would need to suspend the rules. So is that what that's the first question, is that what you're asking? Let's review it in 2 weeks. If we think we need to, then we'll vote to suspend the rules, and therefore we don't have a lapse in coverage.
That if we wish to have a continuous coverage, then a motion would need to be made to suspend the rules and adopt at second reading. Okay. Correct.
I understand what you're saying, but I think we need to act in concert with 2 other entities. And those 2 other entities are Ohio University and the Athens City School System. By extending this to May 31st, both of those will have graduated for the year. OU graduates, believe it or not, the last Saturday in April this year. We still could have snow. the Athens City Schools graduates the Saturday before Memorial Day. If we were to say, no masks, no more, then we have Ohio University still with the presidential mandate, Athens City Schools with their mandate, but the rest of the city doesn't. And I think it's very important in this case that we remain consistent. You're right. Those who have respect for the law, I'm one of those. I'm going to wear my masks. But there are those people who, once that law is relaxed, and I'm going to be one of those, I may take mine off, even though I believe in mask wearing. So I really do think we need to take into consideration those other two entities, and perhaps between now and the 22nd, the appropriate people, either from this council or the administration, has that conversation with President Sherman, with Superintendent Gibbs, as to what their thoughts are and how we can work this together so that we're not giving, particularly to our K-12 students, conflicting messages.
Thank you. Councilmember Reisner.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a meeting on the 28th, don't we?
With President Sherman?
No, I mean, the council
Oh.
A
meeting.
council meeting.
Okay,
Committee meeting.
it's a committee?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. We could have a special session.
Okay.
So, I mean,
28th.
big deal. We have a special session to argue this thing out and give it a full month. I think trying to make a decision in the middle of February is too soon. And I have to agree with my colleague here. I'm beginning to think that with the decline in cases, we need to look more at what the data is telling us to do rather than what we feel we should do. There could be a big difference there. I mean, one is politically expedient, the other is grounded in reality and scientific data. So I prefer to go with the data. And the only way I'm going to get the data is to use as much time as I can get to see what the trends are. It may happen that in the middle of, or the third week of February, our decline may suddenly shoot up. We don't know. I mean, if that happens, then, well, we extend the mandate. But if it starts falling down further, we have to ask ourselves, is the decline an artifact of mask wearing, or is it more of the fact that the Omicron virus has just simply burnt all the available fuel that it can burn? There's very few people left who can get the disease. That makes it an epidemic. It makes it a pandemic. So, again, I would argue that we should look at the data, then make a decision.
Thank you. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'm for the extension as written, knowing that we have the ability to rescind that at any time, I've been able to do a little bit of traveling, not very much, outside of our community, and I'm really proud of Athens. I am proud to be in a community where it's not across the board. It's not everybody's. You're right, Member Spielness, that those who care about it, I'm looking at an audience that cares about it. And you know, walking down the streets of Athens is much more comfortable than being in a community in West Virginia where my son plays soccer on the weekends. And it's night and day. I mean, there's no one, right?
Yep.
And I agree with you that there are different things going on, but I think having this council support legally the wearing of masks, if that makes one other person wear the mask in the streets, then that's a good thing in my mind. I can't wait to get to the day where we are not wearing these masks anymore. And there is music at CASA, and there's music at the union, and there's music in the streets, and we're all out having a normal life again. But I understand the importance And you want to talk about data, I believe that member Grace has it right in this ordinance. 49.25% of the population is vaccinated against COVID-19. And this is in the state of Ohio, right?
That's
That's Athens County.
Athens County.
That's Athens County. So I think the data is telling us to continue, for those people who are particularly more susceptible to having very serious, reactions to getting COVID-19. So, and again, yeah, our numbers are going down, but they were the highest that they have, I remember when the sign on Court Street said 577 and I was freaking out, right? It's like, oh my God. And then it went to 3,000 something and it was just like, Yeah, it's gone down now. I don't know what it is now. It had gone down 1,000. Maybe the mayor probably knows, but I'm just, I think we should continue to be a careful community, a community that shows that we care about one another and care about those who may be immunocompromised. And if we can get rid of this thing in March or whenever, I'm all for it. But let's let the CDC and the data advise us in that. I'm not a scientist, but I appreciate the masks. I don't want to wear it, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Member Grace.
Thank you.
Anybody, yes, council members, if
Thank you, President Isley. Just to tack on a little bit, as someone who is, I think, heading into the minority of people who has not had COVID, I still have not had it, and also is a high-risk person. I have asthma and I have chronic bronchitis. I personally love having these things on people's faces. It makes me feel safer when I'm at work. It makes me feel safer when I'm in stores. So, yeah, we can always get rid of it if we need to, but like Member Crowell was just saying, a lot of the data, 49.2%? That's slightly depressing for our vaccination rates, in my opinion. Less than half, that's very frustrating, but perhaps for now we should indeed keep these things on our faces, as frustrating as they can be, with our glasses fogging up and not being able to hear if somebody says whole or oat milk when at work. But it's hard to tell. A lot of people are getting the wrong milks. But it's a real problem that people deal with. But yeah, might as well keep these things on for now. It's not hard to get rid of it if we need to.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
One last consideration.
Wait, just let me check to
Okay.
see if anybody else wants to speak. Mccary, Councilmember. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Swain.
One last consideration. March 4th through the 11th. Spring break. There are places in this country that many people will go. Ohio University students, permanent residents of Athens, where they're going to be exposed to people that aren't and haven't been as diligent as we have. And we know for a fact after every break, when everybody reconvenes in Athens, the numbers go back up. The second part of this is this. If that were to happen and we have taken the mask ordinance away, I think it's going to be much more difficult to put it back on than to see the numbers go down in the middle of March, middle of April, take it off. And Ben, I think you may have jinxed yourself with that statement that you haven't gotten it yet.
I'm pretty
That
careful.
does concern me, March 4th to the 11th, and as people spread to the four winds and come back to Athens, what will they bring with them? So I would encourage us to continue through the end of the academic school year.
Okay. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isaiah. Just one final, we're talking about data. I want to commend Ohio University faculty, staff, and students. I believe that the vaccination rate is about 92% for the Ohio University community. So we may see things happen when we return from spring break, but that is the population that deserves the most applause for having done what they can do to protect the community. So thank you.
Amen.
Point well taken. Okay. All right, Mayor Patterson.
Just a couple of comments for council. In terms of whatever council decides, and if, you decide to let it sunset, to have council act, just as a reminder, council, and I was so proud of council, in 2020, for within less than 14 days, push forward the ordinance that exists today. And you were on recess. So I have every confidence in the world that if need be, that council can act quickly and reinstate if we find that however this goes, that it is allowed to sunset, and then we find that we have to reenact an ordinance, keep that in mind that is a possibility, and that council did act very, very quickly over the summer of 2020. The other thing, just to share, is that some data points for council. January 15th, we had 560 positive cases here in Athens, which was a staggering number. We had never seen an increase of that magnitude. But today, it's 24 positive cases. January 24th, our highest number was 3,486. Today, positive cases, this is countywide, we're at 1,682. And if this trend continues, in another 2 weeks, we could see a continual drop. The one thing that I hope everyone's cognizant of is that there will be a very special event this Sunday, and so we could see an interesting increase in cases, because I have every confidence in the world that Cincinnati is going to do well this coming Sunday. So.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Do we have any comments from the audience members? Yes. Go ahead.
Jordan Pazal, 61 Franklin. I think council should go ahead with extending this ordinance. I think Councilmember Swank brings up a really good point of there being a lot of folks who don't want to wear the masks, but have enough respect for the law where they will. And I think that we should be using everything we can to, in the multifaceted fight against COVID, to prevent more people from dying. In the U.S. alone, we passed 900,000 deaths recently, which is more than every international war that the country has ever had. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got past 1 million soon. I think that we should be doing everything to protect our residents.
Thank you. Yes. If you could give us your name and address, and
My
if you
name-
represent a group. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
my name is Taylor Mondrag and I live at 36 South Court. I don't represent any kind of group, but I did want to call back something that Councilmember Speldness touched on earlier. A big issue that we have seen in this pandemic is the danger many public workers have been put in for enforcing these mask mandates. Do you have any plans to help them stay safe if this does pass? If people are upset about this being extended past when it was supposed to? This is more for Councilmember Grace, because you brought it up. I didn't know if you had any.
I guess in response to different comments regarding enforcement, I think it's important to know that this ordinance as written is absolutely enforceable, and that businesses who wish to have some backup and support in enforcing the ordinance at their site absolutely should contact the Athens Police Department and request support in individuals can be issued citations for failure to comply with the mask order, but they would have to still be present when the police arrive and continue to refuse to either leave or put on the mask. But also, as was raised, there are businesses that have specifically asked the police to leave and to not enforce the order. But I would just encourage the workers and businesses that do want to have this in place in their place of work to call and ask for the backup of the police if needed.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
I'm Robert Delac, live on Morris Avenue in the city of Athens. I just want to add a couple little points. Mayor talked about the numbers currently, over 1,600 current cases. That's half of what it was. We were at 8 in August, 8 cases. So we were that low, thought we were winning and thought maybe it was done. And we hit an all-time record here again. So I think it would be premature to try and not pass this at this point. I think it should be renewed. I think that makes sense here in this situation because we don't know what's going to be around the corner. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing is about the unenforceability potentially of this. There's been a lot of criticism about that the police department isn't enforcing it, it can't be enforced, or businesses don't want to enforce it, but we have lots of laws in the books that are very difficult to enforce. Speed limits. How many speed limit tickets or tickets are issued in this town, and how many people are speeding? I've asked the police to look at speeding on my street. They came out twice and sat there and for maybe 45 minutes, an hour each time, and that's all they did. Just check the box. Okay, yeah, we answered this guy's question. They didn't issue a single citation. Nothing. So is enforcing our speed limit something that's not done effectively here? Absolutely, it's not effective. People are speeding all over the place in the city, but we still have that law, and there's a reason to have it because it does help reduce speeds. And again, with this law, it is making it a better place to be right now, as Councilman McCall said, that it is a safer place to be, and that's my take as well, that you go out in Athens, you can pick and choose which businesses is one thing, and some are very careful, others are not, but then you don't have to go to those businesses that aren't as safe or holding the mandate to their customers. But that's up to a personal decision. So I think that the mask ordinance is being helpful. It's not it's not perfect, but there isn't really much that is, and so I think we should continue with this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for the discussion. Good comments and questions for this first reading, and we'll return at our next business meeting 2 weeks from tonight for the second reading. We now have announcements and other business items, and we will be next week having committee meetings. So committee chairs, if you can please let Clerk of Council Debbie Walker know by Wednesday of any items that you have for your committees to discuss. And are there any other announcements that folks have before we move on to these last motions? I do have one item to comment on, that we are going to amend this section slightly, and that we previously had as our last item a mayor's appointment to the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Advisory Board, but we are going to delay that and not have that tonight. But we will move on now with a motion to accept the December 2021 financial reports.
So moved.
Okay, and a second? Second from Councilmember Ziff. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. A motion to accept the December 2021 credit card transactions.
So moved.
By Councilmember Ziff.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Crowell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, those have been accepted. The next item is the two motions, one to reappoint a member, and then also some new appointments for the Commission on Disabilities. Councilmember Mccary.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to make a motion here for some new appointments, starting with 4 individuals. Allison Hughes for the Disabilities Commission, expiring 12 of 23. Joe Brumfield, expiring 12 of 24. Michael Rodriguez, expiring 12 of 23. And Tiffany Beals, expiring 12 of 24. With an additional suggestion that we reappoint J.W. Smith to the Commission on Disabilities for a second term, expiring 12 of 24.
We have a motion.
Yes.
for
Second.
those approval. A second from Councilmember Ziff. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries, and those appointments and the one reappointment have been made, and we thank them for their service. The next one is a confirmation of a mayor's appointment to the Shade Tree Commission. Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, President Isley. I would like to move that we move the alternates on the Shade Tree Commission, Nancy Walker and James Dyer, to full members, moving them from to be regular full voting members. Their current terms expire in March of 2024.
Second.
Okay, second by Councilmember Swank. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries, and we thank them for their service to the Shade Tree Commission. They're doing some important work within the city. All our commissions are. We have 19 of them. They all do a good job. Our last section before we adjourn is an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on the agenda. And citizens have 3 minutes to speak. And we don't necessarily offer, it's not a section where we offer discussion back and forth or questions or comments like we had when we were discussing our ordinances, but it is an opportunity for citizens to raise issues. So I believe we have somebody in the crowd. Yes, if you would come up, and if you could please give us your name and address and whether or not you represent a group.
Hi, my name is Reese Wyant. I live at 201 Columbus Road. I'm here tonight with the United Athens County tenants to talk about sidewalks. If we want to have a safe, walkable city that's accessible to people with disabilities and has a smaller carbon footprint, then we need to be able to safely traverse our city's sidewalks. Right now that's impossible in most residential neighborhoods, and it's been that way for several weeks thanks to a lack of snow and ice removal. At the same time, many long neglected sidewalks, especially on the west side, remain unsafe year-round, not only when it snows. Nearly 80% of housing stock is made up of rental properties. Every rental lease includes the implied covenant that the landlord obey all applicable laws. That includes our city housing code, which establishes landlords' property maintenance responsibilities. Those responsibilities include providing a safe, continuous, and unobstructed means of egress from the interior of a structure to the exterior at a street or to a yard, court, or passageway leading to a public open area at grade. And also the responsibility to maintain all exterior property areas and premises in a clean, safe, and sanitary condition. No owner or operator of any premises shall maintain or permit to be maintained at or on the exterior property areas of such premises any condition which deteriorates or debases the appearance of the neighborhood, adversely alters the appearance and general character of the neighborhood, creates a fire, safety, or health hazard, or is a public nuisance. Now clearly there's no way for a landlord to meet those requirements if they're not clearing the sidewalks of ice and snow. But here's the problem. Our housing code doesn't say anything specifically about clearing sidewalks of snow and ice. Instead, Title IX of the City Code does that. It says someone is responsible and someone will be fined if they don't do it, but it doesn't clearly say who that someone is. Instead, Title IX says snow and ice removal is the responsibility of the, quote, the owner, occupant, or person having the care of the property, end quote. This phrasing couldn't be more ambiguous. So who gets fined for noncompliance? The landlord, the property manager, or the tenant? Again, there's no way a landlord can comply with the housing code's egress, safety, and nuisance requirements unless they also maintain sidewalks, and every lease contains the implied covenant that the landlord obey all applicable laws. Thus, not only is clearing sidewalks the landlord's responsibility, tenants are literally already paying their landlords to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much for the comments.
Madam President, could
Yes.
I ask a question, please? Not of the witness. He's talking about sidewalks. We have on the 16th of next week at 2:30 a ad hoc committee to review pedestrian accessibility, which I assume includes sidewalks. At that ad hoc committee, will they be taking testimony? And I'm asking this for informational purposes since we have a large group here today.
Sure. I think at the first, to answer your question, good question, Councilmember Swank, we do at this first meeting just have some basic information to go over, the ordinance and some of the earlier plans that the city had and how often the group will meet, whether or not they want to elect a chair. So there's some of those basic frameworks.
Right, housekeeping, yeah.
But I think beyond that, then there is that committee that will be working, and we will be making that public. It's a public meeting, and so there may well be opportunity later on to address that. And as you say, the possibility for testimony, that will be up for the group, the ad hoc advisory committee to decide. And you do have two of the members here tonight, so Councilmember Solveig Spielness is going to serve on that, and then Mr. Rob Delac is also going to be serving on that. So this is a perfect opportunity if you wanted to engage in some conversation. But thanks for the comments. Yes, is there any, now, we're not going to open it up for discussion. I just answered Councilmember Swanks, but do we have other members here tonight who wish to make comments and want the opportunity for the 3 minutes? Okay. If you will come on up, let's take the young lady in the back, and I will set the timer for 3 minutes, and what it does is there's a little light. I should have explained a little bit better. It goes green, yellow, red to give you a cue when it's going to buzz at you, which is very annoying, but that's the way we work it here, and welcome. So if you could give us your name and address and whether or not you represent a group.
Sure. My name is Maggie Allen. I live at 240 East State Street, and I'm also here tonight with United Athens County Tenants. I know we just had the talk about sidewalks, but I wanted to talk a little more about that. Thanks to Title IX muddying the waters in the way that Reese just described, many local landlords are now claiming that individual leases are what determine who's responsible for clearing sidewalks of snow and ice. Not only is that false, if it were true, we'd never have safe sidewalks because enforcement would be impossible. The city can't examine every lease every year at nearly 6,000 different registered city rental properties to determine who's responsible in each case. And in the past, landlords have fought the city to keep their leases secret. Title IX also means that instead of code enforcement issuing notices of violation to landlords like it does for other housing code violations, code enforcement is just leaving notices on people's front doors. This means that the city is harassing tenants with the threat of a $100 fine for something tenants are already paying their landlords to do, and something that the housing code already requires of landlords. And finally, since Title IX doesn't say who gets fined, the city is just issuing empty threats. The city doesn't appear to be finding anyone, there's no enforcement, and we're just left with sidewalks that are dangerous for everyone and accessible to people with disabilities, and that increase our use of automobiles. To correct this situation, Council just needs to replace the needlessly ambiguous portions of code with clear language that reaffirms sidewalk maintenance is the landlord's responsibility. That is the only thing consistent with our existing housing code. It is the only thing that will make enforcement possible. It's the only thing that will give us sidewalks that are safe for everyone, more accessible to people with disabilities, and that reduce our city's carbon footprint by making foot travel more viable. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will offer one point of information as an update that there were last week 143 warnings given, and I'm assuming that if they had to return to those places this week, they are getting a ticket. So, but I understand the point you're making about the vagueness of Title IX. Okay, and do we have anybody else who would like to speak tonight? Yes, if you could come on up. Yes, Mr. Crane. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes. Okay.
Jordan Pazel, 61 Franklin. I think Athens should amend its criminal code to officially decriminalize marijuana and all other minor drug possession. The war on drugs has torn apart thousands of families and disproportionately affects people of color due to racist enforcement. And I think we need more addiction centers and safe injection centers and less prisons for that. Currently, folks are dying in record numbers from drug overdoses, and criminalization has not and will not save them. The state of Oregon and the city of Toronto have decriminalized possession. I think Athens should follow.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Mr. Crane.
Damon Crane, Hudson Avenue, also with United Athens County Tenants. I appreciate the heightened concern for the issue of enforcement as it relates to a multitude of ordinances the council has or may pass in the future. I did want to add some thoughts on that because I think it is really an important issue. It seems to me that there has been a growing pattern of the city administration and law office simply refusing to abide by city code. The administration refuses to regulate towing operators and enforce towing fee caps as required by code. The code is clear, but the city service safety director just says he has no intention of following it. The administration refused to consult the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Advisory Board in the hiring process of the new APR director as required by code. The mayor said he thought the requirement was contradictory, so he ignored it. Despite the city receiving hundreds of complaints of violation of the mask mandate, as I understand it, it has never really been enforced either. Meanwhile, our city code says that each day of each housing code violation is a complete and separate offense, but the law office ignores that and only charges offending landlords with a single offense, regardless of the number of violations or their duration. And most recently, the law director has announced to local media that she will not enforce the city's Anti-Discrimination Ordinance after a landlord not only published a rental ad, including the prohibited words "no HUD," but also told the Athens Messenger she would continue to defy city policy. Now just imagine if instead of saying "no HUD," the rental ad in question had said "no disabled people," "no women," "no racial minorities," "no seniors," or "no military veterans." And you don't have to imagine, because in effect that's what the ad did say. 82% of local voucher recipients are disabled people, 80% are women, and voucher recipients nationally are disproportionately people of color, military veterans, and the elderly. Therefore, source of income discrimination is racial discrimination. It is gender discrimination. It is discrimination against disabled people, against military veterans, against the elderly. It's discrimination against members of all those protected classes, as well as discrimination against the protected class of voucher holders. Earlier tonight, Councilmember Mccary introduced an ordinance that would ban discrimination based on hair texture and style. Why? Because hair discrimination isn't just hair discrimination. It's a means of racial discrimination. In the same way, source of income discrimination isn't just source of income discrimination. That's why a broad assortment of social justice groups joined UACT and lobbying council to pass this policy last year, including My Sister's Place, the Survivor Advocacy Outreach Project, Southeast Ohio Habitat for Humanity, the Appalachian Peace and Justice Network, and the Ohio Poverty Law Project. Council passed this unanimously. It's an essential and integral part of our city's larger anti-discrimination ordinance, and it's essential that it's enforced. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for your comments. Okay. Is there anybody else wanting an opportunity to speak? Yes, come on up, please. And if you can give us your name, address, and if you represent a group. And I'll set the timer for 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Molly Fanukin. I live at 48 East Green Drive, and I am also here with United Athens County Tenants to speak about the enforcement of the city's Anti-Discrimination Ordinance. If we care about ending housing discrimination, we can't just pass anti-discrimination laws, we've got to also enforce them. To do that, we need the city law director to actually operate as an attorney for the city. That starts with the director publicly arguing for compliance with established city policy and not acting as de facto attorney for those who wish to defy city policy by publicly arguing on their behalf. If Director Eliason simply believed that Judith Jones's violation of the Anti-Discrimination Ordinance didn't amount to the strongest case, the director could simply have issued a warning to Jones while publicly clarifying that this form of discrimination will no longer be tolerated. Then, if Jones continued to discriminate against protected classes of renters, the city would have a stronger case against Jones and any other violators. But instead, Eliason publicly announced that she would not enforce the ban in the instance of an incredibly clear violation. And to no one's surprise, that emboldened landlords, many of whom are now proudly proclaiming their violation of city policy on social media. In light of the law director's recent actions to undermine the city's anti-discrimination ordinance, in light of the more flagrant violations of the ordinance that the director's actions have inspired, and in light of the larger pattern of the city administration and law office arbitrarily ignoring duties prescribed to them by law, we believe it is time for council to take a stand and declare that the legislation you pass actually means something. Thus, we urge council to pass a resolution directing the law director to begin filing charges against landlords who violate the city's anti-discrimination ordinance. While the idea of council directing the law director to do what is already her job may sound strange, the Athens City Code makes it clear that this is in fact a power that council possesses and an option that council may exercise. Specifically, Section 3.03.27 states, when required to do so by resolution of the council, the director of law shall prosecute or defend on behalf of the city all complaints, suits, and controversies in which the city is a party, and such other suits, matters, and controversies as he is, by resolution or ordinance, directed to prosecute, end quote. If council cannot see that the legislation it passed is enforced, there is no point in council passing legislation. So once more, we urge you to take a stand by passing the resolution we've suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other citizens who wish to speak tonight? All right. Then, if not, we'll have a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved?
Seconded.
Second, okay. Moved and seconded by Ziff and Mccary. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:45. Thank you.
Did you get that,